Picture this. You glance at your investment account one afternoon and discover that it grew by more money this month than your entire paycheck brought in. That sounds like the kind of thing that only happens to trust fund kids or people who got in early on some lucky stock. But the truth is, it happens to regular, everyday people all the time. What separates them from everyone else isn't luck, and it isn't a bigger salary, and it isn't some hidden trading trick. What separates them is that they grasped one idea about money that takes years to truly sink in, and they simply refuse to stop long enough to watch it prove itself. Along the road to building real wealth, there are 3 specific checkpoints where the entire experience transforms. Not just the digits sitting in your brokerage app, but the way your whole financial existence feels day to day. These are the exact moments when putting money away stops feeling like giving something up and starts feeling like a calculated move. They're the moments when investing stops being a leap of faith and turns into something you can watch working right in front of you. The maddening part is that the beginning stretch of this path is so slow, so dull, and so unrewarding that most people give up long before they ever reach the first checkpoint. We're going to walk through all 3 of these turning points together. We'll lay out the precise math, explore the mindset shift behind each one, and look at what actually changes in your everyday life once you cross each line. By the time we're through, you'll understand why the people who look lucky with their money usually just had enough patience to let the numbers finish the job they started. Before we dig into the actual checkpoints, we have to talk about why they exist at all. And that comes down to a single idea that seems simple on its face, but is genuinely tough for our brains to wrap around: exponential growth. When you first begin investing, you tend to picture your wealth climbing in a straight line. You drop in $500 a month, you collect a small return, and your balance inches upward. Month after month, it feels like you're doing every bit of the work while your money just sits there, barely contributing. And honestly, that impression isn't wrong, at least not at first. In the early years, your own contributions are carrying almost the entire load. Your returns are minuscule simply because your balance is still small. You're essentially dragging your financial snowball up a hill by hand, but compounding doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in a curve, and the shape of that curve means the opening years barely budge the total, while the later years shove it forward dramatically. Picture a snowball rolling down a mountain. Near the summit, it's tiny and light, and it barely gathers any snow at all. You're the one pushing it, molding it, doing all the physical effort. But the further it rolls and the bigger it gets, the faster it starts gathering snow because its surface keeps expanding. Eventually, the ball is massive and moving so quickly that it would keep growing even if you stepped back and stopped pushing altogether. That's precisely how money behaves when you keep investing steadily over the decades. On this path, there are 3 unmistakable moments when you can actually feel the shift, when the math starts tilting in your favor and the snowball begins rolling under its own power. Each checkpoint isn't only a dollar figure, it's a shift in mindset. Your relationship with money changes, your stress level changes, and the way you approach decisions about your career, your spending, and your future all shift right along with it. So let's begin with the first one, the one that looks modest on paper, but is honestly the toughest and most crucial to reach. Checkpoint 1, $100,000. Veteran investors love to say that the first $100,000 is the hardest money you'll ever make, and painfully, they're right, because this milestone was never really about the number. It's a trial of whether you can remain disciplined and keep contributing month after month while it feels like absolutely nothing is happening. A trial of whether you can resist blowing that money on something flashy and immediate, and for a huge number of people, it's a trial they fail. They come in strong for a few months, sometimes even a year or two, and then life intervenes. A new apartment catches their eye, friends plan a trip, a car promises to make the daily commute smoother. Little by little, the contributions taper off, deposits get skipped, and the brokerage account sits untouched until the password is forgotten entirely. Let's run through the actual math so you can see exactly why this stretch feels so brutal. If you put in $500 every month, roughly $125 a week, into a low-cost index fund averaging an 8% annual return, it takes about 11 years to cross the $100,000 line. 11 years. That's more than a decade of watching your balance creep forward while everyone around you upgrades their cars, upgrades their apartments, and fills their social feeds with vacation photos from places you've never been. Across those 11 years, you'd have personally contributed roughly $64,000. The other $36,000 comes from your investment growth. So about a third of that first $100,000 came purely from compounding. That might not feel like much right now, but it's the first quiet proof that something is beginning to stir beneath the surface. Your money is starting to generate its own offspring, even if those offspring are still tiny. Here's where the mental trap catches so many people off guard. They look at that 11-year stretch and think, if it took 11 years to hit $100,000, it'll take 110 years to reach $1 million. That kind of thinking crushes people before they even get moving. But it's completely wrong, because wealth doesn't grow at a constant pace. It accelerates. And you see that acceleration the moment you clear this first checkpoint. Going from $100,000 to $200,000 takes only about 5.5 more years. You just doubled your net worth in half the time it took to build the first 100 grand. Why? Because your investment base is now large enough to generate serious growth on its own. At $100,000 earning 8%, your portfolio produces roughly $8,000 a year just by existing, almost as much as your $6,000 in yearly contributions. Your money and your effort are now pulling nearly equal weight. Keep pushing further and the pattern continues. Going from $200,000 to $300,000 takes about 4 years. Going from $300,000 to $400,000 takes even less. Each $100,000 milestone arrives faster than the one before it. The snowball is gaining speed, and if you zoom in around year 16, something remarkable happens. That's the year your investment growth officially overtakes your total contributions for the first time. Up to that point, most of your balance was money you personally deposited. After year 16, most of your balance is money the market handed you. By then, you'd have contributed roughly $96,000, while your growth crosses $97,000. From that year forward, you're the minority owner of your own wealth. Compound growth holds the majority stake. This is the moment something shifts inside your head. You stop thinking purely like a saver, someone who hoards cash by trimming expenses, and start thinking like an investor, someone who understands that a dollar put to work today could become $5 or $10 down the road. When you realize a single strong year in the market can tack $10,000 onto your account without you lifting a finger, something clicks. You're no longer just saving. You're building an asset that works for you while you're asleep. And once that realization hits, you never look at money the same way again. If you're still in the early grind right now, still watching your balance creep along, still questioning whether any of this is even worth it, here's the honest truth. Every single month you keep investing is laying the groundwork for what's coming. You aren't failing. You're in the invisible stretch of the process, the part where the snowball is still small and the mountain ahead looks impossibly steep. But you're already rolling, and the people who keep moving through this stage are the ones who eventually get to watch the math take over. This is a good place to introduce two characters you'll run into again throughout this story, Rich Richard and Poor Peter. They earn identical salaries. They started their careers at the exact same age. The only thing separating them is what each one does with an extra $400 a month. Rich Richard folds that $400 into his investment contributions, on top of the $500 he was already putting away. He's now investing $900 a month into a diversified portfolio. He drives a used car, cooks most of his meals at home, and skips the designer labels. Nobody looking at him would guess he's quietly building serious wealth. If anything, he looks a bit less flashy than his coworkers. Poor Peter takes that same $400 and puts it toward a car payment. Nothing outrageous, just a nice mid-range sedan with leather seats and a decent sound system. It makes him feel like he's arrived. He looks great pulling into the office parking lot, and his coworkers compliment the ride. He still invests his base $500 a month, which puts him ahead of plenty of people. But that $400 gap is going to compound over the years in a way that's almost hard to believe. After 25 years at an 8% return, Rich Richard's portfolio has swelled to roughly $950,000. Poor Peter's sits around $475,000. Same salary, same starting line, same number of years. Yet Rich Richard ends up with almost double the wealth, and the gap comes almost entirely from compounding on those extra contributions. That $400 a month didn't just accumulate, it multiplied. Over 25 years, that single monthly difference created a gap of nearly $500,000. And the uncomfortable reality is that poor Peter will probably never pinpoint exactly where the money disappeared to, because it vanished slowly, $400 at a time, into something that started losing value the second it left the dealership lot. Meanwhile, Rich Richard's $400 flowed into something that gained value every single year for 25 straight years. One choice depreciated, the other compounded. Stretched out over decades, those two paths diverge so sharply that they produce entirely different financial lives for two people who, on paper, started with identical advantages. That's the hidden price of looking wealthy before you actually are. And here's the real sting. Poor Peter will likely replace that car every 5 to 7 years, restarting the payment cycle each time, while Rich Richard just keeps driving the same used car. And every month that old car stays on the road is another month his money compounds instead of losing value. Checkpoint 2. $500,000. If the first $100,000 is the hardest, this second checkpoint is the most underappreciated, because this is the point where your financial life stops feeling shaky and starts feeling solid. This is where your portfolio crosses a line that changes everything about how you feel the moment you wake up in the morning. At $500,000 invested and earning an average 8% return, your portfolio generates roughly $40,000 a year, all on its own. That isn't a symbolic figure. That's a real income, higher than the median individual income in plenty of countries around the world. And you earn it without putting in a single additional hour of work. Think about what that actually means. If you lost your job tomorrow, your investments would keep pumping out $40,000 a year regardless. You wouldn't have to scramble into the first job offer out of pure desperation. You could take a month or two to genuinely figure out your next move. You could negotiate from a place of strength instead of fear. You could turn down an opportunity that doesn't feel right and hold out for one that does. That breathing room changes the way you carry yourself in every professional conversation, even if you never actually need to use it. This is the checkpoint that buys you something money usually can't buy: options. The option to walk away from a toxic job without facing financial disaster. The option to take a pay cut for work you actually care about. The option to take 6 months off to be with family, to travel, or simply to think clearly for the first time in years. Before $500,000, nearly every financial decision comes with a layer of anxiety attached. After $500,000, that weight starts to lift in ways that touch your sleep, your mood, and even your relationships. The math behind this milestone is fascinating on its own. Investing $500 a month at 8%, it takes roughly 25 and a half years to reach $500,000. Of that total, you personally contributed only about $153,000. The remaining $347,000 came entirely from compound growth, meaning your investment gains were more than double your total deposits. That's the compounding snowball running at full speed. Your money has been earning money for so long that its earnings are now earning money of their own. At this stage, something else shifts in the way you think. You stop viewing money as a survival tool and start seeing it as a strategic one. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" you start asking, "Is this the smartest use of this capital?" Opportunities that once felt completely out of reach start appearing on your radar. Maybe you look into rental property. Maybe you shift part of your portfolio into bonds for extra stability. Maybe you start exploring dividend-paying investments that produce quarterly income you can actually watch land in your account. Even your money conversations change. You're no longer debating whether to invest at all. You're debating how to fine-tune an engine that's already running smoothly. That shift from building the engine to tuning it feels like a completely different experience. It's calmer, more confident, more creative. You're no longer fighting to survive the financial game. You're playing to win it on your own terms. Here's the part that surprises nearly everyone who hits this milestone. You won't actually feel rich. You'll probably look around your life and think, "I'm still driving the same car. I still live in the same neighborhood. Nothing looks any different." But everything has changed, because now you're carrying a financial cushion large enough to absorb almost any shock life throws your way. An unexpected medical bill? You handle it without touching a credit card. A recession that dents your income for a year? Your portfolio keeps compounding quietly in the background. A family emergency that requires travel and time off? You show up without doing mental math about whether you can afford to miss a paycheck. That quiet certainty, knowing you can weather the unexpected, is what $500,000 actually feels like. It doesn't feel like luxury. It feels like safety. And for most people, safety is worth more than any luxury ever could be. You stop tensing up every time your phone buzzes with a bank notification. You stop dreading unfamiliar envelopes in the mail. The low hum of financial anxiety you've carried for years, sometimes without even noticing it, finally goes silent. This is also the checkpoint where the gap between Rich Richard and Poor Peter becomes nearly impossible to close. Rich Richard, investing $900 a month, almost certainly hits $500,000 years ahead of Poor Peter. And because compounding accelerates faster with a larger base, every extra year of head start widens the advantage even further. Poor Peter is still building wealth, which deserves credit, but at this point, the gap between them isn't just about dollars anymore, it's about options. Rich Richard has them. Poor Peter is still working his way toward them. Checkpoint 3. $1 million. Now for the final checkpoint, the one that carries an almost legendary weight in personal finance. Let's talk about what actually happens when your net worth finally crosses 7 figures, because it's nothing like what the ads and motivational posts want you to believe. There's no champagne moment. There's no fireworks going off on your brokerage app. People who reach $1 million in net worth through steady, decades-long investing usually don't even notice the exact day it happens. They check their portfolio on some random Tuesday and realize they crossed the line sometime in the previous week. And what they feel isn't excitement, it's relief. A deep, quiet exhale, because getting to $1 million this way, the slow way, isn't a moment of triumph. It's a moment of validation. It's proof that the boring plan actually worked, that all those years of skipping upgrades, driving the older car, and telling yourself not yet while everyone around you was buying things actually paid off. You did the thing almost nobody has the patience for, and now the math speaks for itself. Let's look at the actual figures. Investing $500 a month at an average 8% annual return, you'd cross the $1 million mark in roughly 35 years. Over that stretch, you'd have personally put in about $210,000. The rest, more than $936,000, came from compound growth. In other words, 78% of that $1 million wasn't money you earned and deposited yourself. It was money your money earned for you. You did roughly a fifth of the work. The market did the other 4/5. That's the full force of time, consistency, and compounding combined, and it's available to anyone willing to stick with it. And once you cross this line, the math turns almost absurd. Going from $1 million to $2 million only takes about 8 more years at the same rate. Sit with that for a second. It took 35 years to build the first million and only 8 to build the second. That's because your investment base is now so large that even a modest annual return produces enormous dollar gains. An 8% return on $1 million is $80,000 a year. Your portfolio is now earning more in a single year than most people's entire salary, and it never takes a sick day, never asks for a weekend off, and never needs a vacation. At this stage, wealthy people start thinking about money in a fundamentally different way. They stop measuring purchases in dollars and start measuring them in opportunity cost. A $200 dinner doesn't cost a millionaire investor $200. It costs the $500 or $600 that money could have grown into over the next 20 years if left alone to compound. That doesn't mean they turn stingy or stop enjoying their lives. They become intentional. They spend generously on things that genuinely matter to them, family experiences, meaningful travel, education, while ruthlessly trimming spending on things that exist only to impress people they don't even care about. The divide between Rich Richard and Poor Peter at this stage becomes enormous. With his higher contributions and extra years of compounding, Rich Richard likely crosses the $1 million mark 5 to 7 years before Poor Peter. And in those extra years, his portfolio kept right on growing. By the time Poor Peter reaches his first million, Rich Richard might already be closing in on $1.5 million. Same salary their entire careers, same opportunities, same economy. But one of them understood earlier that the car payment was costing him far more than the number on the sticker. At this point, a natural question comes up. What about market crashes? What if the economy tanks right as your portfolio hits a major milestone? It's a fair worry, and the answer is counterintuitive. If you're a consistent, long-term investor, market crashes aren't your enemy. They're actually your biggest advantage. When markets fall, your $500 monthly contribution buys more shares at lower prices. You're essentially getting stocks on sale. And when the market eventually recovers, and historically, it always has, those extra shares picked up during the dip surge in value. The years that feel the worst emotionally are often the best years mathematically for long-term investors. The people who panicked and sold during the 2008 crash or the 2020 crash locked in their losses permanently. The people who kept investing right through those downturns, who kept sending in their $500 a month even while every headline screamed to run, watched their portfolios recover and then push past their previous highs. Staying consistent through the chaos is exactly what separates the Rich Richards from the Poor Peters of the world. And if that's not convincing enough, consider this. Every single major market crash in history has eventually been followed by new all-time highs. Every single one. Which brings us to the bigger picture, the part of wealth building that no YouTube thumbnail could ever capture. Zoom out across this entire journey, from the slow, painful crawl toward your first $100,000, through the quiet confidence of $500,000 to the validation of finally crossing $1 million. And what stands out isn't the money itself. It's what the process teaches you about patience, discipline, and the difference between what looks successful on the surface and what actually is successful underneath. Wealth built this way is quiet. It doesn't show up in your closet. It doesn't announce itself with a flashy car in the driveway or a designer watch on your wrist. It sits inside brokerage accounts and index funds, compounding silently in the background while you go on living your life. And the people who have it rarely talk about it, because somewhere along the way they learned that real wealth isn't about what you can show other people. It's about what you can afford to walk away from. And here's what nobody tells you about building wealth this way. It changes you as a person. Not just in the obvious ways, where you feel more confident or more relaxed, although both of those things do happen. It changes you because the entire process is really a character-building exercise. Every month, you choose long-term growth over short-term comfort. You're strengthening discipline that bleeds into every other part of your life. Someone who can delay gratification with money can usually delay gratification with their health, their career choices, and their relationships too. The same habits that build your wealth also make you more patient, more resilient, and more thoughtful about how you spend your time. A job that's making you miserable, you can walk away without panicking. A risky business opportunity that excites you, you can take the swing because failure won't wipe you out. A year off to be present with your kids during a critical stretch of their childhood, you can take it, knowing your portfolio keeps growing whether you're watching it or not. That's the real endgame. Not luxury, not status, not the ability to impress strangers at a dinner party. Freedom, the quiet, unglamorous, deeply personal kind of freedom that only comes from decades of doing the boring thing while everyone around you chases the shiny one. And yes, this takes time, 20, sometimes 35 years for most people. But those years are going to pass no matter what you decide to do with your money. 35 years from now is arriving whether you invest or not. The only real question is who you'll be when it gets here. Someone wishing they'd started the moment they first heard about compound interest, or someone quietly watching their portfolio grow more in a single month than they used to earn in an entire year. The math doesn't care about your background, your education, or whether you grew up with money. It doesn't care about your salary, your job title, or which city you call home. It only cares about two things: how much you invest consistently and how long you leave it alone. That's the whole formula. Everything else is just noise. So start wherever you are. $500 a month if you can manage it, $300 if that's what you've got. Even $100 a month is a snowball that will eventually roll on its own. The amount matters less than the consistency, because that first $100,000 is genuinely hard. The second checkpoint at $500,000 is where everything shifts, and the $1 million, that's simply what happens when you refuse to quit before the math finishes doing its work. Rich Richard understood all of this. He didn't have a bigger paycheck. He didn't get lucky. He didn't have access to some secret fund or insider trick. He simply understood, earlier than poor Peter did, that the $400 going toward that car payment every month wasn't just a purchase. It was a decision about who he'd become 25 years down the road, and he chose the version of himself who could walk away from anything instead of the version who merely looked like he already could. That same choice is sitting in front of every person watching this right now.